Imagine standing on the brink of despair, with nowhere to turn and everything you hold dear slipping through your fingers. For Maya, a devoted single mother, this was her reality, a life overshadowed by a dangerous secret and the relentless fight to protect her ailing daughter. But when she walks into a secret auction, prepared to sacrifice her pride for survival, the last thing she expects is salvation in the form of a mysterious Arab billionaire. What begins as a cold transaction takes an unexpected turn, revealing a connection that will unravel her past and rewrite her future. This isn't just a story of survival. It's one of compassion, courage, and the power of human connection. Rami, a man cloaked in wealth and secrecy, enters Maya's life with intentions she struggles to understand. Is he a savior or another force trying to control her? As their worlds collide, the answers uncover a life-changing truth that challenges everything they thought they knew about trust, love, and the resilience of the human spirit. What would you do if your only chance at hope came wrapped in a contract? Would you take the leap, risking your independence to save what matters most? As Maya faces impossible choices, her journey with Rami unveils a story of empathy and inspiration, one that proves even the most unlikely bonds can heal the deepest wounds. And just when you think you've grasped the full picture, their story takes a turn that will leave you breathless. Maya's heart pounded as she stepped into the grand hall, her every instinct screaming that this was a mistake. The auction was a paradox of opulence and desperation. Chandeliers gleamed above, while the air crackled with silent bargains. She wasn't there by choice, but by necessity. Her past had cornered her, and with her daughter's safety hanging by a thread, she knew this was her last resort. Every face she passed seemed colder, more calculating, as if humanity had been replaced with profit margins. Among the crowd stood Rami, a man cloaked in mystery and power, his eyes sharp enough to pierce through her resolve. He hadn't planned to bid, yet something about Maya's presence demanded his attention. Was it the defiance in her posture, or the way she clung to a flicker of dignity despite her circumstances? As the auctioneer's hammer fell, Rami made the unthinkable decision to claim her, not out of conquest, but a strange pull he couldn't ignore. And in that moment, Maya's life shifted irrevocably. The transaction was as cold as the marble floor beneath her feet. Maya, now bound to a man she barely knew, felt the sting of humiliation. Yet, beneath the surface of Rami's stoic demeanor lay a flicker of something unexpected: compassion. He seemed to see her not as a commodity, but as a human being with a story worth uncovering. Still, Maya's guard remained firmly in place. Life had taught her that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. What Maya didn't realize was that Rami's interest in her wasn't random. Behind his calculated exterior was a man haunted by his own shadows, a past that intersected with hers in ways she couldn't yet fathom. His presence at the auction wasn't a coincidence, but part of a plan he had meticulously constructed. The stakes were higher than either of them knew, as danger loomed closer than Maya dared to imagine. As days turned into weeks, Maya began to see cracks in Rami's carefully crafted persona. He wasn't the cold, unfeeling billionaire she'd first assumed. There was a weight behind his actions, a burden he carried that mirrored her own. It was in the quiet moments, the way he spoke to her daughter with unexpected gentleness, or the way his gaze lingered on Maya when he thought she wasn't looking. Slowly, her walls began to tremble. Rami's true intentions came to light when a threatening figure from Maya's past resurfaced, reminding her why she'd agreed to the auction in the first place. He wasn't just her savior. He was her shield. Together, they formed an uneasy alliance, navigating a labyrinth of secrets and dangers that threatened to consume them both. Maya's mistrust battled against an undeniable truth: Rami had risked everything to protect her. The tension between them grew thicker as the reality of their situation became clear. Their lives were intertwined, not just by circumstance but by a shared vulnerability. Rami's carefully guarded world began to unravel as Maya's presence forced him to confront the very things he'd buried for years. In her, he saw a reflection of his own pain and resilience, a mirror he hadn't dared to look into until now. But as one question lingered in Maya's mind, her instincts screamed louder than ever. Could she truly trust him? The lines between savior and oppressor blurred with each passing day, leaving her in a web of confusion and doubt. Yet, in the depths of her uncertainty, a faint glimmer of something unexpected began to grow, a seed of hope that perhaps, together, they could rewrite their stories. Rami's offer came like a thunderstorm on a quiet day, unexpected, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. He presented Maya with a contract that could change everything, the promise of the finest medical care for her daughter. But the terms were unconventional, to say the least. She would have to live with him for a year, a condition that made her question every shred of her independence. Yet, as a mother desperate to save her child, could she really afford to refuse? Signing the contract felt like surrendering a piece of her soul. Maya couldn't shake the unease of what she'd agreed to, even as Rami assured her that the arrangement was purely practical. The mansion she now called home was vast and intimidating, much like the man who owned it. But the deeper she delved into his world, the more she realized it was not the opulence but the emptiness that defined Rami's life. Beneath the surface, he was just as lost as she was. It wasn't long before Maya discovered the unspoken layers of the contract. Rami's late wife became an unexpected presence in their interactions, her memory haunting every corner of the mansion. The pain in his eyes when her name was mentioned told a story Maya hadn't anticipated. This wasn't just a deal for him. It was a step toward confronting the ghosts of his past. And in an odd way, it mirrored her own journey of battling for her daughter's future. Maya's daughter, despite her illness, brought life into the cold, structured world of Rami's home. Her laughter echoed through the halls, chipping away at the walls Rami had built around himself. Watching him with her child, Maya saw a side of him she didn't expect, a man who longed for connection but was too scarred to admit it. For the first time, she questioned whether their arrangement was purely transactional, or if it was transforming into something much more profound. As the months passed, Maya found herself grappling with emotions she hadn't anticipated. Rami's presence, initially a source of fear and resentment, became oddly comforting. His actions spoke louder than his words, revealing a compassion he tried so hard to hide. And yet, every step closer to him felt like stepping into dangerous territory. Could she allow herself to trust him, knowing how much was at stake? Rami, too, found himself in uncharted waters. Maya's resilience and unwavering dedication to her daughter stirred something in him, a longing he hadn't felt in years. Her authenticity clashed with the artificiality of his world, forcing him to confront the emotional void he had tried so hard to ignore. He began to see her not as part of a contract, but as someone who could heal wounds he didn't even realize were still open. Their relationship grew more complex with each passing day. The contract that had initially bound them became a catalyst for deeper conversations and unspoken truths. Maya's strength challenged Rami's guarded nature, and his vulnerability offered her a glimpse of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. Together, they navigated a fragile balance, their connection becoming both a sanctuary and a battlefield. But the terms of the contract loomed over them like a ticking clock, reminding them that their time together was limited. With every moment they shared, the stakes grew higher. Would they find a way to move beyond the confines of their agreement, or would the weight of their pasts pull them apart? The answer remained as uncertain as the fragile bond they were beginning to forge. Rami's life was a fortress of solitude, each brick laid by years of betrayal and loss. The world saw him as a reclusive billionaire, a man who had everything yet seemed to want for nothing. But beneath the polished exterior lay scars too deep to heal, abandonment by those he loved most, and a relentless focus on building his empire to mask the emptiness inside. That was, until Maya entered his life, shattering the stillness he had so carefully cultivated. Maya was unlike anyone Rami had ever encountered. Her determination to protect her daughter, even at the expense of her own dignity, struck a chord in him. It wasn't pity he felt, but an unshakable admiration for her resilience. She reminded him of the parts of himself he had buried long ago, dreams he once had, and the compassion he had long since abandoned. Slowly, her presence began to dismantle the barriers he had spent a lifetime constructing. In the quiet moments, their shared humanity began to surface. Maya's stories of struggle mirrored his own in ways neither of them expected. Her laughter, though rare, lit up the cavernous mansion, and her vulnerability brought warmth to a place long devoid of it. Rami found himself drawn to her honesty, a stark contrast to the superficial relationships that had filled his past. For the first time in years, he questioned the choices that had led him to his isolated existence. Maya, too, saw past Rami's cold exterior to the man underneath. He wasn't just a figure of wealth and power. He was someone haunted by regrets and longing for redemption. She began to understand that his aloofness wasn't arrogance but a shield against pain. In him, she saw the possibility of change, not just for herself but for a man who had lost sight of what truly mattered. Yet, her instincts warned her not to trust too easily. Their connection grew through shared vulnerability, each opening up in ways they hadn't with anyone else. Rami spoke of his late wife and the emptiness her absence left behind, while Maya shared the weight of her fears for her daughter. These moments, raw and unfiltered, became the foundation of an unspoken bond. They were two souls searching for solace in a world that had given them every reason to give up on hope. But their growing closeness didn't come without challenges. Rami's world was one of power and control, and Maya's presence disrupted its fragile balance. He struggled to reconcile his feelings for her with the life he had built around himself. Meanwhile, Maya grappled with her own doubts, questioning whether she could truly trust a man who had once seemed so unapproachable. Their journey was as much about confronting their inner demons as it was about facing external threats. In Maya, Rami found a chance to rewrite his story, to step out of the shadows of his past and into a future that felt more genuine. Her strength inspired him to reconsider the choices that had led him to his solitude, and her compassion reminded him of the importance of connection. Slowly but surely, he began to believe that redemption wasn't out of reach, that perhaps, through her, he could find a way to heal. Yet, even as their bond deepened, the road ahead remained uncertain. The weight of their past loomed over them, a constant reminder of the obstacles they faced. For Rami and Maya, the question was no longer whether they could trust each other, but whether they could overcome the fears that had kept them isolated for so long. And in that uncertainty, the seeds of something extraordinary began to grow. The decision to move Maya and her daughter into Rami's mansion was unexpected even for him. His home, once a symbol of isolation, now buzzed with life as the young girl's laughter filled its vast, empty spaces. For Maya, the transition was both a blessing and a challenge. She couldn't deny the comfort and security the mansion provided. Yet the idea of accepting Rami's help left her wrestling with her pride. Still, her daughter's happiness made it hard to regret the choice. Rami, on the other hand, found himself navigating uncharted territory. He had spent years avoiding emotional entanglements, yet now he was learning to be present in ways he never imagined. Whether it was helping Maya's daughter with her homework or joining her in impromptu games, Rami discovered a new side of himself. For someone who once lived solely for business, this unexpected family dynamic began to reshape his understanding of fulfillment. Maya's daughter became the glue that held them together. Her innocence and enthusiasm melted Rami's stoic exterior, teaching him the value of life's simple joys. She had a knack for asking the kind of honest, childlike questions that left Rami both amused and introspective. Through her eyes, he saw the world differently, less as a battlefield to conquer and more as a canvas for connection and growth. In turn, Maya saw glimpses of the man Rami could become, though her reservations remained. Despite the growing bond, Maya found herself grappling with conflicting emotions. Trust didn't come easily to her, especially when Rami's world seemed so far removed from her own. The stark contrast between their lifestyles often left her feeling out of place. Yet, Rami's patience and his willingness to adapt slowly began to break down her defenses. Still, a question lingered in her mind. Was this newfound dynamic sustainable, or was it just a fragile illusion? Rami's attempts to foster a sense of family often clashed with his deep-seated fear of vulnerability. He had built his life around control, and opening himself up to Maya and her daughter felt like walking a tightrope. Yet, every moment spent with them pulled him further from the lonely, detached existence he had known. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, a balancing act between who he was and who he wanted to be. As the days turned into weeks, Maya and her daughter left their mark on the mansion and on Rami's heart. Little by little, their presence transformed the cold, sterile environment into a home filled with warmth and laughter. For Maya, the change was bittersweet. She had always dreamed of giving her daughter a better life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their happiness was tethered to a man she was still learning to trust. The delicate balance they created was tested often, with moments of friction threatening to unravel their progress. Rami's powerful position and the weight of his past loomed over them, casting shadows on their fragile connection. Yet, every argument, every misunderstanding, seemed to lead to a deeper understanding of one another. Slowly, they began to redefine what family meant, not bound by blood, but by the shared commitment to one another's happiness. Even as their bond grew, an unspoken tension lingered. Maya couldn't help but wonder how long this newfound harmony would last. Rami, too, wrestled with doubts, questioning whether he could sustain the emotional vulnerability their dynamic required. But amidst the uncertainty, one thing became clear. Together, they were building something that defied expectations, a family born not out of convention, but out of compassion and courage. The contract that once dictated Maya and Rami's relationship now felt like a distant memory, its rigid terms eroded by the bond they had built. What began as a calculated arrangement had blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted. Rami, once the epitome of control and detachment, found himself longing for the very things he'd spent his life avoiding: connection, vulnerability, and love. For Maya, it was both terrifying and liberating to see their relationship evolve beyond obligation. Rami's transformation was evident in the little things. The way he started prioritizing moments with Maya and her daughter over his business dealings, the tenderness in his voice when he spoke to them, and the rare, unguarded smiles that now graced his face. Each gesture was a quiet rebellion against the walls he'd built around himself. Maya, too, noticed how his actions reflected a man who was learning to care without expecting anything in return. And with each passing day, her heart began to soften. Maya's daughter became the silent witness to this unexpected love story. She sensed the shift in the atmosphere, her innocent observations often catching Rami and Maya off guard. "You're not as scary as you look," she once told Rami with a cheeky grin, a statement that left him laughing and Maya blushing. The young girl's unwavering trust in Rami mirrored what Maya was beginning to feel herself, a cautious but undeniable faith in the man who had stepped into their lives. The turning point came on a quiet evening when Rami, holding the contract in his hands, declared it meaningless. His voice trembled as he admitted that what he wanted wasn't dictated by legal terms, but by his heart. "I don't want this to be about obligations," he said, his gaze locked on Maya. "I want it to be real." Maya was stunned by the vulnerability in his words, her own feelings rising to the surface as she realized how much he had come to mean to her. Rami's confession set the stage for a new chapter in their lives. The barriers that once separated them began to crumble, replaced by a mutual understanding that went deeper than words. They weren't just two individuals navigating a complicated arrangement. They were a family in the making, bound by shared struggles and newfound hope. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real, a love forged in the fire of their trials and tempered by their resilience. As their relationship deepened, Rami and Maya found themselves blending their lives in ways they hadn't imagined. Cultural differences and past traumas became opportunities for growth rather than obstacles. Maya introduced Rami to traditions from her own upbringing, while he shared the stories that shaped his identity. Together, they discovered that love wasn't about erasing their differences but embracing them, creating a tapestry that reflected their journey. The culmination of their love story was a wedding that celebrated not just their union but the resilience of the human spirit. The ceremony was a fusion of their cultures, a vibrant testament to the power of compassion and empathy. Maya's daughter, acting as the flower girl, beamed with joy as she watched her mother walk down the aisle. For Rami, seeing Maya in that moment was the realization of a dream he hadn't dared to believe in, a life filled with love, family, and purpose. Yet, even as they exchanged vows, the journey ahead remained uncertain. They knew that their love would be tested by the realities of their world and the weight of their pasts. But as they stood hand in hand, surrounded by the people who mattered most, one thing was clear. Together, they had rewritten the terms of their lives. And in doing so, they had discovered a love that was as extraordinary as the journey that brought them there.